Chapter 11 of The Giant Killer, or The Battle Which All Must Fight, by Charlotte Maria Tucker. This recording is in the public domain. Lynne Thompson. Chapter 11. The Prisoner in Darkness. "All for the best. Yes, doubtless it is so," thought Aleck, as he watched the conduct of Bertha during that long, tedious fortnight. It seemed as if the necessity of thinking for others, of working for others, and at the same time fighting against besetting sins, had made the little girl several years older in that short space of time. Aleck looked upon Bertha, before the arrival of the Probyns, as a nice little playmate, very willing to oblige him, and, though possessing a temper by no means perfect, very seldom letting him suffer for it. He had liked her then, he now respected her. He had felt her then inferior to himself, not only far below him in powers of mind, but with a disposition naturally less sweet, and an inclination to indolence, which prevented her from making the best of what abilities she had. Now he regarded his sister in quite another light, and if the Probyns had improved Aleck in outward behaviour, by obliging him to be careful of his words, and to avoid all vanity and affectation of manner, which exposed him to their ridicule, Bertha was influencing him by her example in another way, for the observant boy could not help feeling that in the Christian fight his sister was the firmer champion of the two. As the rice–plant is said to grow with wonderful rapidity in the rainy season, that it may keep its head ever above the waters rising around it, so the troubles and difficulties that beset her made the character of Bertha rise. There were so many little things for her to do in the absence of her mother, that Bertha felt as though she could never manage them all. Thus the first foe which she had to overcome was sloth, and the child rose an hour earlier than usual, that she might write to her mother, and attend to her father's comforts, without encroaching on other duties. She knew that her own lessons and Laura's should be learned. She set the latter her little tasks, and cheerfully undertook the tiresome business of teaching, though Laura, lively, playful, seldom giving her attention, was a pupil to try the patience of a much older instructress. Then Constantine, poor unhappy Constantine, shut up in darkness and fed on beef tea, became Bertha's peculiar charge. Adolphus took care to avoid going near him when he could help it. "He is as peevish as a porcupine," said he. But Bertha, as though all his rudeness and unkindness were forgotten, gave much of her time to beguiling the weary days of the poor prisoner. She altered her own study time and Laura's, at no small sacrifice of her convenience, that when Aleck and Pro were at lessons with Mr. Roby, Constantine might not be left alone. She chatted with him cheerfully, told him stories that she had heard, sang to him songs that her mother had taught her, and sitting close to the window to make the most of the little light which struggled in, read to him till both eyes and voice were tired. By this arrangement Bertha lost much of Aleck's society. She had to learn lessons when he was free to play, and sadly disinclined was she often to study, and perhaps even more so to teach, when, already weary with amusing Constantine, and longing for a merry game with her brother. But Bertha's earnest prayer, when she rose in the morning, was that she might be enabled to fulfil the duties of the day, and each night, as she laid her tired head on the pillow, she felt thankful for the help that had been granted her. Angels look with more pleasure upon the efforts of a little child to overcome temptation and to serve her heavenly King, than upon the proud trophies of earthly conquest, the deeds of daring of earthly heroes. And how felt Constantine during this long fortnight? Had his accident been to him all for the best? It was so, for he was thus given time to reflect, his mind was forced back upon itself. He might do wrong still, but he no longer could do so thoughtlessly. He was struck by the difference between the behaviour of the Robys and that of his brother towards himself. The latter shunned, the former sought his society, and no self–love could blind Constantine to the fact that it could be from no pleasure that they found in it. Why did Bertha never reproach him with the past? Why did Aleck employ all the resources of his fine memory to amuse one who had treated him with insult? Were they not showering down benefits from the tree of forgiveness? Was he not standing like one of the savages at the foot of it, looking up? For he could not avoid looking up at those whose conduct raised them above him. This was a grating reflection to Constantine, but he could not drive it from his mind. Did he feel grateful? Perhaps he felt grateful, but if so, something prevented him from showing that he did so. He did not like to fancy himself indebted to any one. The idea made him irritable and peevish. Then, when his heart reproached him for rude words to the kind girl who never returned them, who was leaving the sunshine and flowers that she loved to sit in a gloomy apartment with him, Constantine had an uneasy remembrance of what had been read about gratitude being chased into the swamp of forgetfulness. He did not choose to examine his own heart sufficiently to ascertain whether anything like this could be the case with himself, but he felt somehow or other discontented with his own conduct. He began to suspect that there was something wrong in his character. Conscience was awake, and making her voice heard. One day Aleck entered the room where Constantine was sitting gloomy and thoughtful, scarcely listening to the book which the patient Bertha had been reading to him for more than an hour. "Good news!" he exclaimed. "Another letter from mamma! The best account of grandpapa which we have had yet. The doctors say that he is now quite out of danger, and mamma feels so much happier about him that she hopes to be here the day after to–morrow." Bertha clapped her hands with an exclamation of pleasure, and Laura, who was playing with her doll in the corner, jumped about the room in delight. "Mamma's coming back! Mamma's coming back!" she cried. "Oh, she will have been a whole fortnight away! It has been like a year! I have missed her so!" "I wonder," thought Constantine, "if I were to go away, if any one would be sorry or miss me?" The answer which conscience returned clouded his brow with a frown, which, to the Robys, who knew not its cause, seemed like an unkind refusal to share in their joy. "Bertha," said Aleck, "papa has given me leave to walk over to the farm to order a cream cheese for mamma. The weather is so delightful to–day, and the walk is so pleasant over the fields. Would not you like to come with me?" "Very much, but I have all my lessons to learn, and to hear Laura the multiplication–table." "Not done them yet? How's that? They used to be all over by this hour. Why, what have you been about all the morning?" Bertha glanced at the book which lay on her knee, and then at Constantine, who felt her silence more than he would have done any words. "I might make some trifling return," thought he. "I might offer to hear little Laura, but—" what was the feeling that prompted that but? The same which tried to stifle all emotions of gratitude, the same which made Constantine ashamed to own that he knew that he had behaved ill towards those who repaid all his insolence with considerate kindness. "I will take the multiplication–table in hand," said Aleck gaily, "and the spelling–lesson besides. Here, Lautie, pet, put down your doll, and look like a sober little student, and tell me if 2 × 2 makes 3. Don't hurry with your own lessons, Bertie dear. I'll wait for you. We shall have plenty of time for our walk." Constantine's opportunity was lost, and he felt more angry with himself than ever. The next day the doctor paid Dove's Nest a visit, looked at the injured eye, and declared it to have so far recovered from the blow, that though reading and writing were to be avoided for the present, Constantine need no longer be considered as a prisoner. The look of honest pleasure and sympathy on the faces of the Robys touched him more than he would have chosen to own. He felt for a moment inclined to thank them for their kindness. Then, as if a seal were on his lips, he pressed them together and was silent. But Constantine and his brother could not avoid being participators in the pleasure with which Mrs. Roby was welcomed back on her return. They shared with her children in making the garland which was suspended over the entrance of Dove's Nest. They crowded with them to the green door when the sound of wheels was heard. And though Laura had the first kiss, and Bertha the first smile, while Aleck's hand was pressed in his mother's, the Probyns were not forgotten at the moment of arrival; and in the little remembrances which she had brought from London, Mrs. Roby made them share alike with her children. Kind inquiries after Constantine's eye were uttered in the same tone of affectionate interest as they might have been spoken by his mother. Oh, how much was there to tell, and how much to hear on the first evening of Mrs. Roby's arrival! If one of the party was more happy than all the rest, it was Bertha. Her young heart was bounding with delight. It was not only that she could again rest her head on that kind bosom, kiss that dear hand, and listen to the voice that she loved. It was a consciousness that her own affection had been tried and proved, that her mother would find that work had been done, and duties performed, as carefully in her absence as though she had always been near, that her mother would feel that her child was to be trusted, that she had indeed done her best to be a comfort to her parents. "Now for the Giant Killer!" exclaimed Laura the next day, as, seating herself on Mrs. Roby's knee at the usual reading hour, she watched the opening of the well-known volume. "Had you time to prepare another chapter for us, mother, in the midst of all your anxieties?" said Aleck. "One more chapter, my boy, and the last." "The last!" exclaimed every one in the room. "Why, we have not half done with giants," cried Aleck. "I could name a dozen more, at least. There's stupidity." "Self–conceit," cried Adolphus. "Cruelty," joined in Bertha. "Disobedience," said Laura. "Yes, my children, there are many more giants to be slain, but I think that my tale has explained to you sufficiently the nature of our fight, and of the enemies to be subdued, to enable you to find them out for yourselves. Let each search his own heart carefully. Our hearts are our chief battle–ground, and having discovered what sins most easily beset him, let him apply himself resolutely, with watchfulness and prayer, to overcome the evil principle within." "To–morrow is Sunday," observed Aleck. "I have just been thinking of something to vary the holy occupations of the evening. Suppose that we all sit round the table as we are doing now, each with a pencil and paper. You will give out the name of some enemy, and we will write down examples from Bible history of those who conquered, and those who were conquered by it. Then we will give in our papers to you, and they will be read aloud in the hearing of all." "Not a bad idea," replied Mrs. Roby. "But I can't write," suggested little Laura. "You shall think, then, without writing," said her mother, "and tell us upon what characters you have fixed, before any of the papers are read." "I know what I should write if hate were the enemy named," cried Adolphus. "King Saul was overcome by it quite." "And who conquered the evil passion?" inquired Mrs. Roby. "David, at the cave of Adullam," replied Aleck. "Several examples might be given," said his mother. "We will certainly try your new Sunday recreation to–morrow. And now to proceed with my tale." CHAPTER 12.